Hello, everyone, and welcome to 360 Ed, the TV. My name is Chooks, and I'll be your show host for today. With me in the house today is James Bevelander, Specialist Design Lead, Deloitte. Welcome, James.
Thank you for having me.
Just before we begin, can we get to know who you are and what you do, and what excites you about your work you do at Deloitte?
My name is James. I've been working in the L&D industry for the last 24 years. Throughout that time, I've been in a whole heap of creative roles, from visual design, leading a video production team, motion designer. So I love all things visual design.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment, I'm specialist lead at Deloitte as a visual designer and motion graphics artist,
Mm-hmm.
where I get to work on some really exciting projects, bringing really cool ideas and content to life.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So we're going to piggyback on that. The core of any learning design project or any design project is collaboration. We're looking at, got a subject matter experts, we know how it is, and we know we've got maybe a client or anyone who's collaborating. We're thinking about making sure that we get to the education objectives or the learning objectives. Now, how have you been able to ensure that successful collaboration between the instructional designer and your subject matter expert?
I think it's about challenging the traditional workflows that have sometimes happen in learning development, almost that production pipeline where you'll have the instructional designer who's talking to the stakeholder. They're kind of doing that in isolation. And then myself as a visual designer or a developer will say, get a storyboard. We haven't seen it before. We haven't really had much say on a lot of the creative decisions that have happened within there. And then we have to build it. Yeah. But I guess the problem with that is, and you look at that and go, that's quite an efficient workflow. But the problem is, if I've got some ideas or there's maybe some approaches that we could take that could elevate the learner experience, it can be quite hard to go back on a signed off storyboard and try and get those decisions made. And otherwise I can go and build it. Maybe it's not the best thing. The client will give feedback and then it turns into a bit of reverse engineering. So for me, collaboration is absolutely key. And that's, I guess, flipping the script on that workflow and getting involved as early as possible. So getting all the key parties at the table and doing it in a really learner-centric way where we're concepting, we're prototyping, we're iterating, and all that is done around, I guess, the core needs, the core objectives of what we're trying to build.
Just out of curiosity, scope creep. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, I think scope creep is always an issue. And as I said, I think like that traditional format can lead to scope creep because a lot of people, and particularly clients, they can't envision the end product through a storyboard that's in Word. Whereas if we're being, really learner-centric and we're prototyping from the start, pitching ideas, pitching concepts, doing all that, I guess, hard work in visualizing what the end product will be at the very start, I feel you can shortcut a lot of those issues. Because, as I said, there's a lot of people that struggle to envision that end product. If you can just do that slowly, really lo-fi, when everyone's on board, that's when you go for it. So it's almost like the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah, because I've worked on a couple of projects and I know that scope creep is one of the things that happen at some point. You end up doing what we call minimum viable product.
Absolutely.
Then you can make some changes afterwards. Talking about visual and motion design, now, what are some principles where you're thinking about UX, user experience, in terms of developing intuitive content?
Well, I guess user experience as a whole field is geared around creating seamless user experiences. And I'll just focus in on the visual design principles that sit within it and sit across all of design, really. That I think they're absolutely integral to, for most people that are touching, that are involved in production, that they're across those visual design principles, which, help create something that is like a beautiful, elegant looking end product, but it's also about creating something that's easy to use, that's going to be seamless. Because I guess the way I look at it is visual design helps carry the content, it helps carry the learning. It shouldn't get in the way. Whereas clunky, bad design, maybe the visual hierarchy is all over the place, or the contrast is shot. Then learners are going to be struggling. That their attention span is going to be shot before they've even started to learn, before they've even been challenged with these new and exciting concepts. So as I said, I think UX and visual design is about carrying the learning. It's not about getting in the way.
Really good point. You're thinking about the learner insight in that design, but at what point would you involve the subject matter expert in that visual design? Is it early on, or is it maybe at prototype level?
I think it's early on. But having said that, sometimes, and that's the beauty, like design is a messy process. Sometimes there's a bit of back and forth and testing and learning as you go. And you might get, a few stages in and you go, this isn't the right approach. We need to change this up. But I think to your question, it's getting involved early, and it is prototyping. It's what I like to do at the start of a project is to try and push the creative boundaries as much as I can. And then they might get wound in a little bit, but then we know where we are.
I can see how that could be tricky as well. So I think that is a good segue into my next question. We know that, and you work in a very niche area, visual and motion. Because it's niche, there will be complex aspects to it. Now, how do you communicate that with a subject matter expert that can't see beyond what you can? Just so that they can understand how it's contributing to the learning content.
That's a really good question. And I almost see myself as the front line for the learner or the end user. So often I'm given some really complex material and I don't understand it. So I need to try and understand it. And if it's, let's say it's a concept or something, a really abstract idea that I feel is really hard to explain in just words, then we can approach that in a creative way. So whether that's through, a 1 minute explainer video, which unpacks something in a way that text won't, or perhaps it's looking at a model that is being used, but it doesn't really have much of a narrative to it. Maybe we could reimagine that as a bit more of an analogy that's easier for people to, I guess, attach to. Because I think visual design, a really creative design within learning, has the potential to create little memory hooks that is, it's easier for people to understand and remember those ideas when they hopefully take them out onto their job or the real world.
I'm triggered to just ask a question. Have you had any situations where you got to the end of the project, you thought the subject matter expert was happy with whatever prototype happened, and you had to flip or do a 360 and revise a couple of things because something went wrong? Has that ever happened?
Oh, it happens often. It does happen often, but I think it's, you can mitigate that to a point, but it's about bringing them along on the journey as much as possible. And that's why I think, starting off small, coming up with a concept and wireframes that could be really loose, and then you build from there. That's the thing, you might get to user testing and they don't like it, or maybe there's another stakeholder group that disagrees with it, and then you can go back to the drawing board. But if you get that feedback early on, then hopefully you can shape things before it becomes an issue. But you can't ever fully cut that out. But if you are bringing people along the way and they're signing off as you go, then I guess that mitigates things, that mitigates scope creep. It also means that, we're building the best.
You touch on a very important point there, sign off.
Yes.
Once you sign off, it should be so that oftentimes you find that people get new thoughts at the end of it, and you're like, that's not part of this project. So it's that, like you said, taking them on the journey, managing the expectations, testing the prototype, and also getting that quick feedback so you can make some small changes before the final product. Is there anything else you'd like to share about the exciting work you do in visual and motion design?
I just think it's about reiterating that point I made earlier. you know, and sometimes myself as a designer, I want to create something that's, you know, maybe a bit wacky and say very novel.
Yeah.
But really I always need to pull myself back to the core principles that is, you know, it needs to be learner-centric. It needs to be user-centric. And if what we're doing gets in the way of the learner experience, then yeah, that's not good design. It may look really pretty, but in the end of the day, it's actually bad design.
Bad design if it doesn't meet the client's needs. Yeah.
And I think there's, you know, industry, sometimes there's a want to make something engaging.
Yes.
Which comes from a really good place. It comes from a good place, but sometimes it is the want of the stakeholder for their own personal needs to create something that's a showpiece as opposed to what the learner actually wants. If the learner has only got 10 minutes to jump into a little micro course or something, they don't want to have to do who wants to be a millionaire quiz that goes for 40 minutes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your insight. We appreciate your time today. I'd like to say massive thank you again. To our audience, you can reach James if you want to learn. This is a very niche area, and I know there's a lot of learning going on. With VR, AR coming on board, how do we do this more effectively? So thanks for coming again.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Ta.